I think it was a progressive revelation, to be honest with you. But I think probably the epiphany to where I felt like God had called me to a true leadership position was early on in ministry. I had one of my best friends, somebody who I really looked up to, and didn't realize that he actually looked up to me as well. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, Mike, I don't think you really realize who you are. I said, what do you mean? He said, man, I read books upon books upon books about leadership. And this is one of the things that I admired about him. He was just a phenomenal student. He was a little bit older than me, so he had experienced some things in life that I hadn't experienced. So his words were weighty to me. And he said, I read books upon books upon books about leadership. And the things that I see, and I'm trying to learn from books, I see like you do a lot of these things naturally, and I don't think you realize it. It's like just kind of woven into who you are. And it was kind of like the light bulb went off for me at that moment, because I had the opportunity not to see myself in the mirror, but I had the opportunity to see myself from someone else's perspective. And I think one of the biggest challenges in leadership is you know your strengths and your weaknesses, you know your successes and your failures. So, I was maybe more focused on what I perceived to be deficiencies, and he really was just magnifying and really opening my eyes to, man, these are like incredible leadership qualities that most people pay to seminars to learn how to do or read books to learn how to do. And dude, I don't know if you realize it or not, but like it's woven into who you are. And then because I'd known him my entire life just about, he began to expound upon things that he had like gone back to when we were young, middle school years, high school years, college years. And it was like kind of like a wow moment for me. So it was really more getting an opportunity to see what other people saw in me that maybe I could not see in myself as a leader. So this was early on. I didn't have a big title in ministry. I was just one of the associate ministers within the ministry. And there was a topic that was on the table, and it was something that I was incredibly passionate about because of the principles that I subscribe to as an individual and really from a biblical perspective. And it just so happened that my father, who never was a preacher, never was a minister. He served in his local church, but he never had a title. He happened to be in the room for this meeting, and the entire room essentially was against me. Like the entire room took the opposite position that I had taken in this particular conversation. But I stood my ground, and with the entire room against me, I stood my ground. I began to expound upon why I believe my position was the right choice for the church. And over time, and this was a long drawn out meeting, over time, the room gravitated towards my position. And when we left the meeting, man, my father pulled me aside and my father said, man, son, I don't know if I've ever been more proud of you. And my dad was my biggest fan. Him and my mother, they were incredible parents. Was at every football game, every basketball game, every graduation, every recital. But he said, I don't know if I've ever been more proud of you. And I said, Dad, why do you say that? He said, because I watched you stand unapologetically for what you believe to be right, even though the entire room was against you. And he was like, man, that's what real leaders do. It'd be my dad. My dad, to me, he was the most authentic person I've ever met in my life. And my dad was the type of person who he was aware of his strengths and he celebrated his successes, but he was completely transparent about mistakes that he had made in his journey as well. And as I looked at my father, there were elements of him that I aspired to be like, but then there were other elements of him that he revealed to me that, in a sense, he kept me from making maybe some of the same mistakes that he had made in life. So, man, my dad, he was an incredibly hard worker, man. For 35 years, he worked 2 jobs. He worked in juvenile corrections, and he was a janitor. And I watched my dad work 12 hours a day, every day, for 35 years. And he said, Mike, the reason why I do that is it's based upon love. I was like, what do you mean, Dad? He said, man, people will tell you that they love you. People will use, eloquent words to express their love for you. He said, but real love is sacrifice. And sure, there were other things I could have done with my time and done with my money. He said, but when I had you, he said, then I wanted to do everything I could to position you for success. So I chose to work 2 jobs so I could have extra money. So when you went to college, I could support you there. So when things came up, I would have some sort of resources or means to be able to be a support system to you. So to me, it took my focus off of famous people. It took my focus off of, people with platforms, preachers, etc. And man, I had a hero right there in my home. And the thing that I loved about my hero is he was always cognizant of showing his human side as much as his hero side. And that really kind of shaped me as who I am as a man. It's become kind of one of the mantras of our ministry, anointed but flawed. That's who my father was, and that's who I aspire to be. I want to be true to a couple things. I want to be true to Christ. I want to be true to my culture. I want to be true to my community. I want to be true to my family. And ultimately, I want to be true to myself. And I think those characteristics are the characteristics I saw in my father. And that made me want to aspire to be like that as well. Man, I love reading, and I didn't always love reading. I actually didn't read an entire book until I was 21 years old. So the first 21 years of my life, I did not complete an entire book. My first book that I completed was when I was 21 years old, and it unlocked something in me. So I absolutely love reading. I think we do things like this so often. We preach in the community and around people so often that, man, to be honest, I love just time by myself. I love, man, to get in a book and really have that time. And man, I'm a sports fanatic. I love sports. I'm an ultra competitive person, and probably sometimes too competitive. A lot of preachers on Sundays, when they get done preaching, they go home and rest. Every single Sunday, myself and a group of guys, we go play basketball. And it's one of our elders of the church who actually opens the gym for us. And I'm such a competitive person. You said you wanted Mike, right? Like, I'm such a competitive person that when I talk trash out there, and man, I'm like a win by any means necessary type of person. And our elder pulled me aside after one Sunday session of playing basketball. And he was like, and this is one of my oldest friends. He said, Pastor, man, we may need you to sit out a couple weeks. He said, too much of Mike is coming out on the court and not enough Pastor Mike. And man, we need you just to tone it down a little bit. So, man, I'm just a regular guy. You said before I became Pastor Mike, I was Mike. I think one of the things that has been a blessing to me is I never lost that. I never forgot about who I was, because I'm still that same guy. Kind of what you see is what you get. I'm nervous every time. Right? Every time I take the podium to preach or to speak, I'm nervous. Sit down and do an interview like this, I'm nervous. Because all these years later, I still can't believe God chose me. And all these years later, it's still sometimes a shock to me that people want to hear what I have to say. So, some people say, man, you make it look so easy and you're so good at doing X, Y, and Z. But the reality is, man, I'm always incredibly aware of how frail and human I am. And if it's not for the anointing of God, if it's not for God's presence and God's grace, but I can't do any of this. So, man, probably people would be surprised that every single time, regardless of what the platform is, I'm nervous. Honestly, I got a crew of them. We live in this cancel culture generation, and people talk about how small their circle of friends are. Man, one of the greatest gifts of my life Man, next to my family is the friends, the genuine, authentic, multiple decade friends that God has given to me. I had the gentleman, Reggie Pace, who I just referred to, the one who really spoke words of affirmation or leadership into my life. Have the elder I just told you about in the basketball story, Elder Ted Johnson. Those are my two oldest friends, grew up across the street from each other. Our executive pastor was my college roommate. We've been friends for 25 plus years. And then I have a couple other guys from high school. So I got kind of like a starting five. It would be very hard for me to say who's my best friend. God really, really has blessed me with genuine friends that celebrate everything that I do. Genuine friends that, man, will pull me aside and rebuke me to my face. Because to your point, like, they know Mike even beyond Pastor Mike. And like, they have the ability to pull Mike aside and say, Mike, you're tripping. So, man, I'm incredibly blessed, man. Curtis Poole, Keyshawn Williamson, my two best men in my wedding, who, man, continue to be friends and support systems throughout this day. So I really got five. It'd be hard for me to choose who the best friend is, but man, I'm blessed and I'm graced. And, you know, people say your network speaks to your net worth. If that's true, I'm a very rich man. I'm a very rich man because of the people who are in my life. My favorite form of artistry, it is public speaking and preaching. You know, I consider that to be, there's a science element to it, but I consider it to be an art as well. And what I do is I'm captivated by really strong public speakers. And it's not really one particular persuasion that I'm drawn to. I have a certain love and admiration for it all. I worked in corporate America for 18 years. There were a couple of guys in my company. I didn't think these men were saved, but they were phenomenal public speakers. And every time they got up, I would just be taking notes, not even necessarily on what their content was, but the art of how they would capture the crowd and how they engage people. You know, obviously, man, we're blessed in this city with great preachers. Look at people like Bishop Clark or Pastor Troy, Bishop Brian Keith Williams, who was a former pastor in the city. Like, these are people I looked at, all very different in how they do it, but all, like, I'm enamored with all of them and the excellence that they did it with. You look on a national level, you got people like Bishop Jakes or Creflo Dollar, or even now some younger preachers like a Mike Todd. Man, I love great public speakers. To me, it is an art, and people who do it at a level of excellence, man, are people who I look up to. Well, I eat dessert every single day, 7 days a week, and it varies. My favorite dessert is probably peach cobbler with vanilla ice cream. But man, you give me some cheesecake or one of the things that we eat on a regular basis in our home is Edie's Caramel Delight ice cream. So I eat dessert 7 days a week. I'm a relatively thin guy. People wouldn't believe it, but it is a must. It is built into every single day. We're gonna eat dessert. But if I had to choose one, it'd be some bomb peach cobbler with some vanilla ice cream. My favorite quote, the price of greatness is responsibility. The price of greatness is responsibility. And I think the why behind that is everyone wants what they perceive to be greatness or what they perceive to be success. But I'm not sure everyone is prepared for what comes along with that. There is a certain responsibility that comes along with what we would call greatness. Bishop Jake said something one time, and it really completely shifted my paradigm as it related to what success looked like or even felt like. Bishop Jake said that he had been building for 20 years, and one day he looked up and he looked at all that God had done in his life, and he was like, man, I didn't realize we were here. He said, I didn't realize I was here. I didn't realize that really we had achieved success. And he said, and the reason why I didn't realize that we were successful, he said, because success didn't feel successful. And he said, blessed didn't feel blessed. because between where we started and where we got to on this level of success, there was so much pain and sacrifice and so much scrutiny and just all the struggles associated with that journey from the starting point to success that he said it didn't feel like success. So I think that quote, man, the price of greatness is responsibility, kind of encapsulates that. If you're going to be great, and I don't care what your vocation is, I don't care what the field is, there's going to be certain responsibilities that come along with it. And coming with those responsibilities, there's going to be certain struggles and challenges and things of that nature as well. My life mantra is, it really is centered around authenticity. Being, again, true to who I am as an individual. And I don't ever want to compromise me for any of the public stuff. So I try to be the same person in public that I am in private. I try to always be Mike Young. If I introduce myself to people, it doesn't matter where it is or what the platform is. I never introduce myself as Pastor Michael Young. I always introduce myself as either Mike Young or Michael Young, because at the end of the day, when I go home at night, like, that's who I really am. So I always want to be, genuine to myself. Reason why is I think, man, being the authentic version of me helps me be authentic towards other people. And I think authenticity is incredibly important, especially when it comes to ministry, and really like loving people in a really genuine and authentic way. I think people can sense that. The Bible says love without dissimulation, right? That word dissimulation speaks to hypocrisy or false motives. I think people can tell when your love is laced with motives. So I try to be true to me, authenticity. So when I express myself to other people, I think they can feel that level of authenticity as well. At 15, I would probably talk to myself about deferred gratification. I think as a younger man, I think expectation of whatever my immediate goals were or even long-term goals, I expected them to happen just like this. Not realizing at that young age that many times God may have things that are prepared for you, but you're not necessarily prepared for it. And, I believe in purpose and destiny. And that's really kind of like the theme of our ministry is purpose and destiny. Well, God may have purpose prepared for you, but I may not be prepared for my purpose. And what prepares you for your purpose is that process in between. So at 15 years old, I'm probably like most young people, I expect it to happen just like this. I want it to happen right now. But the reality is the real blessing is not necessarily in the destination, but it's in the journey or the process or the progress that you get to experience throughout that journey. You asked me a question earlier, when did I realize I was a leader? And it's been incremental. Like, there's been revelations along the way that have kind of revealed to me who I am as an individual, who God has called me to be. So the first one would be just appreciating deferred gratification. Like, if you continue to sow seeds now, you treat people right now, you serve now, you invest now, eventually those seeds that you sow now are going to produce fruit and produce a harvest. The second thing that I would advise myself, and this is one of my mantras too, is, man, just love people. At the end of the day, just love people. And what I've learned to do is I've loved to learn people for who they are. I don't expect people to be something that they're currently not, right? Like, wherever you are in your growth process, I've learned to love you there. And I think many times what happens, and this has been true for me earlier in my life, is I had expectations for people that they couldn't necessarily at that season in their life live up to. So, man, just learning, just love people. Wherever they are in their growth process, learn to love them there. And then over time, as they shift, then maybe your love can shift as well. Yeah, man. When I think about my life, it has to start with my parents and just the uniqueness of who they were. My mother is a white female, and she is from upstate New York, Palmyra. My father is an African-American man, and he's from Gifford, Florida, which was the segregated portion of Vero Beach, Florida. Father raised under the Jim Crow laws of the South. My mother is from Northern America. They come here to Columbus, Ohio, establish a relationship that produces me. When I look at who they were as individuals, my mother was unapologetically white. She subscribed to all the traditions of her culture. My father was unapologetically black and subscribed to all the traditions of his culture. And they both raised me in love in both of those cultures. I think what that has done is that's kind of like catapulted me to be able to have, I think, what are critical and crucial conversations, especially in this day and time that we're living in now. So, I think back to pivotal moments. I had the honor and the pleasure to be the first speaker for Black History Month in the chambers of City Hall in the history of Columbus, Ohio, like little old Mike Young from Mifflin High School. I think about what we did this summer when we did the prestigious protest. We had over 1,000 black men, all suited and booted, and what was a historical moment for our city, I think a historical moment for our culture. I've had the opportunities to talk about race in front of literally 99.9% white audiences of several thousand people. I think it all goes back to who my parents were. My parents were both union stewards. My parents believed for fighting for people and giving a voice to people who didn't have a voice. So for me, moments that have taken place throughout the journey, a lot of times it goes back to things that the people who birthed me and raised me taught me throughout the process. I think about from a ministry perspective. I've only been a member of one church, and it's the church that I now pastor. When I first came to this church, it was a storefront church, probably 30-something members. And my father-in-law was the pastor. And what attracted me to the ministry was not his preaching, his ability to dive into hermeneutics or homiletics as it related to the scriptures. What attracted me to the ministry was his integrity as a man. And I watched him love his wife. I watched him serve other people. And it made an indelible impression upon me. It's often been said, some things are caught, not taught. Like, I learned how to serve by watching my father-in-law, who was my pastor for 12 to 15 years. So, the church that God planted me in, many times people told me to leave the church. Many times people, when people would hear my preaching and platform ministry, they would say, man, leave that church. You're in the wilderness. People need to hear what you have to say. I never felt led to do that. In hindsight being 2020, the things that I learned in a storefront church with very little members, very little money, really helps define the DNA of who the City of Grace is today. So it takes me back to really those foundational people in my life, man. My mother and my father, man. The only pastor that I've ever had, like, those people have helped define me in these critical moments, man, that I've lived in, currently living in, and I'm sure going to come in the future as well.
Born and raised here in Columbus?
Born and raised Columbus, Ohio, man. Product of Mifflin High School, Go Punchers. Man, went to the University of Akron on a football scholarship, and man, when I graduated from college, I couldn't have thought of moving anywhere else. Like, I love my city. I love the city that raised me. Man, my wife, if she had it her way, like, we probably would have moved to Florida years ago. But man, I believe my destiny and my purpose is here. Yeah, I believe it's here.